I'm Elisabeth Vincentelli, and I write for the New York Times.
And I'm Peter Marks, theater critic for the Washington Post. We're thrilled to be back for another episode of Marks and Vincentelli, which is the podcast for all of your theater needs. No others are required.
That's it.
Today, Elisabeth and I have two wonderful guests, Jeanine Tesori and David Lindsay-Abaire, who together composed and wrote the lyrics and book for Kimberly Akimbo. Tesori wrote the music, David wrote the book and lyrics, and it just won the Tonys for Best Musical, Best Book, Best Score, also for Best Actress, Victoria Clark, and Best Featured Actress, Bonnie Milligan, and is ongoing at the Booth Theater.
Highly, highly recommended. If you're in New York or if you're coming for a visit, it's well worth seeing. We both love the show. I think I can say that. But before we start grilling Jeanine and David, we want to talk a little bit about the 76 Tony Awards. Do you think, Peter, that this was one of the nuttiest ceremonies in recent memory because of the WGA strike? And because of the strike, they could not have any scripted material. And that means no skits, none of those songs, none of those like cutesy stuff that they always put in everything, no jokes. So the presenters just pretty much named the nominees, and then they brought them on stage, and then people gave an acceptance speech, and that was it. I mean, and there were excerpts from the musicals, of course, but in terms of, it was just really spare in a weird way, which I kind of enjoyed, actually.
Yeah, no. I thought, nutty. If it's nutty, it's nutty in the most delightful sense of the word,
right? Yes,
because it was just letting theater be theater. It was turning it over a sense to the shows and to the idea of theater as just something as an entertainment. Without the forced quality, you find out that it's also artificial when they try and put words in mouths of presenters that just are trying to sound cute or witty, and they end up sounding canned. And I thought this was, and the fact that Ariana DeBose, who is delightful as a host, introduced the show by saying, "Look, this is the way we're doing this." She showed there were no teleprompters. We're just winging it in a sense. It really, I thought, involved us much more sympathetically in what they were trying to do. And also, we found out that if you really focus on the shows, it's a fun evening.
Yeah, it really worked. At first, I can't help it, but I first was thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a little dull. And then I realized, wait, every year I complain about those skits and those songs.
Right.
So now what am I complaining about? They're not there. I would say some of the acceptance speeches were a little too earnest for my taste. Not crazy about that in general, this kind of earnestness that felt a little repetitive after a while. But like, who's going to begrudge people? I mean, okay, me? No, I won't do that. But who's going to begrudge people for like using their moment, to acknowledge whatever, they're themselves, their friends, their peers, who they are, what brought them there. Sure.
Yeah, doesn't it seem like the DNA now of award shows, people being, imperious or, self-congratulatory or overly emotional, all those things tend to make for some cringy moments.
It really made me miss Mark Rylance, who,
oh yeah, he's hilarious. Yes, exactly. When he just reads a poem or something enigmatic. Yeah. No, exactly. It lacked those kind of crazinesses. But I thought, for example, that the opening number of just having them dance, no words at all, was and I've since heard that, by the way, that was only approved a few hours before they did the show, that they could even dance. With originality on the show. The Writers Guild was sort of mulling that over, whether even that was appropriate.
Oh, interesting. So dancing with originality, an original dance.
In other words, not right. They did that. That whole section had to be choreographed, not written. Except I guess maybe if they did the notation, but I doubt that had to happen. So yeah. So I hope they learned something from this.
What did you think of the fact? So this year, I think it was the first year at the United Palace, which is a theater that's in Washington Heights in Manhattan, not the usual Radio City. Right. I've got to say, I have been to that place, which is fantastic. I'm not sure it read really well on TV. To me, it looked kind of not great. I don't know why I was really stuck on that carpet. I felt the carpet really felt like some kind of.
Sometimes I miss things, because I'm actually writing a story as I'm watching the awards, and I may not have paid as much attention. I heard from people who were there that it was like being in a steam bath. That it was really, really hot in there, and I do think it benefited from not being in of the barn that is the Radio City. I felt like it was less of an echo chamber, and the numbers as a result looked more like they were on Broadway as opposed to not shoved, but sort of like thrown onto a gigantic stage.
Right.
So for me, that was okay.
I think it was okay because of the weird circumstance of this year's ceremony, but I think for a regular year, I'm not sure it would work all that well. The one show I want to talk, I do want to talk about. What did you think of Leopoldstadt winning for Best Play? Because I think Leopoldstadt is such a poor play. It is so bad to me. I really do not like it. I think it's poorly structured. It's really demonstrative. It's incredibly confusing. I did not care for it at all. Which is hard, of course, because that means saying, you don't care for Tom Stoppard. It is his life.
Right. Yeah, it's complicated. I liked it more than you did. I thought but I had an emotional response to it, a very deeply emotional one, and I couldn't separate out the fact that this was a man, an 85-year-old man, coming to terms with an identity that he really had not explored for most of his life, or came to it very late in his life. So for that reason, and I think it was a sentimental choice, I think it was also a practical choice. It's the one play that ran the season. And I think that was an achievement. And I think that partly accounted for it winning. And probably also the others were all worthy. They were all good plays. And that might have split the vote among people who, like one Pulitzer Prize winner or the other.
No, I'm sorry. I don't think Aunt Nomo was worthy of being there.
Which one?
Aunt Nomo was also nominated, and that is not.
It was fun.
I mean, it's fine. It's fine. But compared to the other four, I don't think there was any.
I mean, I thought prima facie should have been the fifth nominee, but that's just.
Agreed.
But anyway.
It's actually, that's an interesting example of such an amazing performance that's eclipsing the play itself. And the play, I think, is a lot better than people say it is. But the performance by Jodie Comer is so unbelievable that you were like, well, no, actually, you know what? It's also a good play. And it's also very well directed.
And it recouped in 10 weeks. They just announced that it recouped its $4 million investment. So that in itself is a remarkable achievement in a very fraught time.
Yeah.
Last thing we should probably mention, I think, that was of note and important was the two non-binary actors, J. Harrison Ghee and Alex Newell, won Tonys for Best Actor and Featured Actor in a Musical, which is historic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm waffling on the issue, but the issue of whether there should be gendered acting categories. Some awards are going towards like non-gendered categories.
Right.
The Tonys right now still are. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Yeah.
Someone asked that at a session I was at this week, looking back at the Tonys, and I completely ducked the question. I admit I'm still mulling it myself, and I think people with much better antennae would should join the conversation and help me understand the issue.
Yeah,
But anyway,
well, we do agree on one thing.
What's that, Elisabeth?
It's The right show won for Best Musical.
Yes.
I mean, yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So we're going to talk to the creators of this of the show. A quick summary before we get to our guest. Kimberly Akimbo is the story of a New Jersey teenager named Kimberly Lavaco, who has a condition that advances her aging process by 4 or 5 times the normal rate, so that she's a 16-year-old, but she looks like she's in her 60s. And she's played by an actress in her 60s, Victoria Clark, Tony winner, once again, her second time. She won originally for Light in the Piazza. The story is the story of her life, a troubled family life, and her developing relationships in high school with kids she knows will be together for a long time, and she won't be. David Lindsay-Abaire adapted his own play, which ran in 2000 with Mary Louise Burke as Kimberly, memorably, wrote the book and lyrics this time. And as we said, it vacuumed up a lot of Tonys to its credit and to Broadway's credit.
I'm a really big fan of David Lindsay-Abaire. I think he's one of my favorite American playwrights. So you probably know him from his most famous play probably is Rabbit Hole, which got the Tony and the Pulitzer Prize in 2006. I'm personally very partial to Good People, which ran on Broadway, was plum role for Frances McDormand. Some of his other plays are Fuddy Meers and Ripcord. And Jeanine Tesori, I'm going to go out there and say that I think she's the most accomplished musical theater composer of the 21st century. I really don't know who else who has that versatility, that so she actually burst on the scene in 1997 with Violet, and then she made the jump to Broadway in 2002. And what's remarkable, I think, with her run is how diverse the shows that she's worked on are. Like it's just nuts. So she starts with Violet, and then in 2002 she does Thoroughly Modern Millie. And of course, since then, I've included Caroline Orchant, Shrek the Musical with David Lindsay-Abaire, Fun Home, another Tony Award, and Soft Power with David Henry Wong. Right? So every time a new lyricist, and she is protean. She adapts every time, and yet still sounds very much like herself. You can really hear a Jeanine Tesori score. You can spot it. It just really blows me away. And she's also doing operas. She did Blue, and she has Grounded coming up at the Kennedy Center this fall. So without further ado, let's welcome them. I guess my first question is, did you guys meet cute? Did you have how did you, did you have a rom-com meeting?
Ogres are very cute. If you think that ogres are cute, that's, then yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
We were sort of an arranged marriage. We had met only in passing once before Shrek. But that's how we met. We were teamed up on Shrek, and it was, love ever after.
When did you realize it was going to work as a partnership? Because if you're put together, it's not obvious.
I think yesterday.
Still figuring it out. It's the only thing that we for sure knew did work on Shrek was our relationship and our collaboration. No, that came out completely wrong. I'm not throwing any shade. There's lots of Shrek. The process was really wonderful, and the people that we worked with were, incredibly intelligent and really great people to work with. But there were a lot of people giving lots of notes and had lots of opinions. And when I was working with Jeanine, it was always just about the work that we had to do, how to write songs and how to make a book scene work. And so that was the easiest part. And so, after Shrek, I said, well, this I know works. I would love to work with you on a musical where there aren't, 30 people giving us notes, and it's not based on a giant movie that everybody has an opinions about. I'd like to do it the way I write a play, where it's bad for as long as it needs to be bad. And then Jeanine said, well, how about one of your plays? Why don't we start there?
And how long did it take before the two of you were really cooking in terms of a meeting of the minds about how to approach songwriting together? Jeanine, you've worked with other partners. David, I don't know, have you ever have you worked with any other composer before? I mean, was this a new experience for you?
By and large, I'd done a couple songs here and there with a couple other composers, but it wasn't on a show. So this was the first time for doing deep diving.
So Jeanine, I'm just curious, when the idea of Kimberly happened, was there anything daunting? There's one thing when the two of you are approaching a project together and you're both sort of at square one. Was it an advantage to have David that familiar with his own material? Or did that present a different kind of intellectual challenge for you to get inside his head and figure out what the motifs were, what the style, or was it really two separate sets of expertise that allowed you the freedom that you'd have in any other musical writing project?
The funny thing was, and David has mentioned this before, is he was so willing to look at the new at the work as new that a lot of it was starting to get thrown out. And I had said to him, the reason we're doing this play is because it's a great play. And it's also because it was 20 years ago, I think there was, in the 17 stages of who we are and who we've been and who we are yet to become. And there was so much distance, I think, for you, David, that he was able to almost revisit it as someone who has gotten so beautifully skilled at craft. But the impulse of a younger writer, was on the page. So I think the beauty of it was this visitation that the ambition met the skill. But I feel like the ideas that we have when we are young writers, they don't go away. We just become perhaps better, or we can get more specific. But I feel like I know David so well at this point that the fun part was trading family stories so that we could figure out, and who knew we had so much in common with our histories about, the coping mechanisms we have are very similar. I think David is a much healthier person in a lot of ways, but,
nope.
I don't know how that happened, but, so, I think that was the great part of it. If he had written this play recently, we wouldn't have been able to make it a musical.
Yeah, I think that's true. That the 20 years gave me specifically the distance to reinvestigate all these characters anew. But it was in fact Jeanine who was more attached to some of the stuff in the play, that I was willing to throw out everything, and she would. What's great, I mean, there are many great things about Jeanine, and that would take an entire podcast if I listed them. But one of the best things about Jeanine is she thinks like a dramaturg, and she thinks like a playwright. And so it's easy to have a conversation about dramatically, what are we doing here? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to reveal about character, in a way that not all composers speak that way. And so we would dig in and reinvent things and how to tell it in a song. But she would also say, but there are these two great lines in the play that you didn't put into the musical script. Do you remember those? And wouldn't that actually accomplish what we're trying to accomplish here? And so she was much more of a protector of the original script than I was.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That point, to have someone who is who's thinking on multiple levels, who's not just sitting down at a keyboard or a guitar or whatever the instrument is, and just trying to work out the notes, or like some content. To the idea that there is a playwright in a composer and a composer in a playwright seems one of those ineffable things you can't really. It's hard to even explain, I think, the nature of collaboration on that level to people who aren't in the room with you when you're
well, especially if you think, there are, I won't name names, but there are composers that just want the music to sound really good. They want to show off as composers.
Right.
And Jeanine's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeanine, but it seems like Jeanine always starts from character. So much is made like, all of her scores sound so different, which is absolutely true because she's working with all of these different writers, but also because even within each score, each character has their own voice because she is serving that character and not serving herself as a composer and showing off. She does it anyway because she's brilliant, but each song and character sounds different because, again, she's thinking like a playwright.
I'm curious, I think one of the trickiest things in Kimberly Akimbo is that the tone is really, really tricky because it's one of those you laugh you cry. You don't really know where the line is between the two. That I think it's just the hardest thing to master. Did you have conversations about that? Like, for instance, the show is never maudlin, which to me was the biggest trap. Like, was it something you were really conscious about? But it's also so hard to say, like, how, well, okay, now this is too maudlin. This is like, how did you gauge that?
Well, I think the tone, right, in all of David's work, I would say, exists on the razor's edge. I'm very interested too how many things are either comic or tragic, and so much of life is tragic comedy. It just is, and all our family stories, because this is really about family. At the end of the day, it is about the choice to live until you're not here anymore, which we all can make in some ways where it's available to us. But it's also about family and how people are doing the best they can. And the great villain is that life is ephemeral. That's the villain. The people themselves are not villains. I mean, they do terrible things. They say terrible things, but they are up against it in a way that so many families are. And I think to bring them forward, that we recognize that so many of, even an inevitable turn, that was every holiday dinner at my house, what is the inevitable turn? That you just have this hope because so many families are dysfunctional. They don't function well. And when you come to the holiday pressure that today is the day that we're going to have a great time, it simply just puts the vacuum seal on what people are hoping for and what they're capable of. And then the turkey flies, and then somebody says something, and that's it. And so we were really conscious about how funny that actually is, about, you're chewing and someone's chewing loudly, and someone's doing this, and then finally you're like, don't say that thing, and there are too many people at the table because you can only fit 4 and there's 17 of you. I mean, that's just funny. So I think a lot of David's, that humor comes from simply being available to observing life.
I mean, that's where it starts, is that we share that sensibility, that we would, share horrible stories about each other's families. And we would laugh so hard because it's just ridiculous and people behave so terribly and inappropriately that it's funny. And for both of us, we share those stories and we see the humor and also how horrible it is at the same time. And so just as collaborators, we just live in the same world. And then in terms of like the nitty gritty of the actual craft of it, we would have to take its temperature. We started in a good place. And then sometimes one of us would say, or Jessica, our director as well, Jessica Stone, would say, oh, it's feeling a little too earnest. And then the phrase that Jeanine would always say is, we got to squeeze some of that, DLA lemon juice on there to make sure. Or, this is feeling so light that we need to ground it. What is the song actually about? And so always taking the temperature of whatever the scene or the song is and calibrating. And, mostly we did that ahead of time, but sometimes we didn't even realize it until we were in front of an audience. But it was constantly making those little adjustments. So we knew that it was landing at 2 places at the same time. Or turning on a dime when it was one place, then quickly spinning it around to be like, but it's also funny, but this is actually serious. And that's just, taste and calibration, honestly.
I love that we can talk about these nuances, these subtleties, these things that we can relate to in our own lives, because I'm afraid that in some cases musical theater is not investigating those things quite as profoundly as I'd like to see it happen more often. And I think one of the great things about the Tonys for Kimberly this year, I think it's, ordinarily we can overstate the importance of awards, but I think that the recognition of a musical like Kimberly Akimbo really does, I feel like, validate the entire history of the endeavor of what musical theater tries to do. And I think you guys advance that in your piece. And I wonder if you were at all worried in moving to Broadway that you were swimming against the tide, that there was a feeling, I'm not sure the richness of songwriting teams that existed, and wonderfully, John Kander was honored on the show, and that tradition felt bolstered in his award. But I wonder if you feel like, finding songwriting teams who can create, musicals with depth and the kind of subtlety and emotional nuance that you're describing are an endangered species.
Oof. I mean,
Silence.
Well, it's a that's a very complicated question, because there's so many tentacles, right? There's so many things. Part of it is hunger, and part of it is commerce, and what is a transactional experience, an event experience. I think the fact that it's the same with all awards shows. The minute that you take writing off of a televised event with designers and choreographers is the minute that you do not respect the work that happens behind the scenes. And that is also the minute that you say to other people, you do not value it in the same way. It has nothing to do, like, my ego is solid. Do I need to be on a show? I do not. I want to be on this show because we're all artists and we're all writers here. But that is the time where we want to say to a lot of people, what you do is valued, even if it's seen or heard in the mouths or the steps or the design or the how other people operate 8 times a week. So it's a very strange thing to not amplify that and not teach people, as in film, about what the opportunities are below the line.
I'll just add, I'll say, the kind of show that you're describing, I don't know that it is an endangered species, because I know lots of composers and writers that are in fact writing those musicals. Whether they are being produced is another question entirely. Whether they are being produced on Broadway is, I think most of them aren't being put on Broadway because of the commerce of it all. The fact that we have a weird little show that's really difficult to describe puts us at an incredible disadvantage. So yes, we needed the awards for lots of reasons. One of them is just to put something on the poster,
right,
to make people want to go see the show. So it's really hard. But yeah, the work is out there. And that's not to take anything away from the shows that I love that are, less nuanced, that are just entertainments. I love big, giant entertainments. And I understand that that's what tourists want to see. And so we're up against those kinds of shows that are, we hope our show is funny, but it's also sad. And it's also, and as soon as you say also, people might go, I'm out. It's hard. I don't know what it is that you're describing. I know a one-line description. And if that's 40 people tap dancing, then I'm in. But if it's about a girl with an aging condition, then you go, what is it? And who's in it? And, how much are the tickets? Then it's very difficult. So I think those shows are being written. It's just hard to get them to Broadway. And we had everything going for us. We had crap loads of amazing reviews and all of those off-Broadway awards going in. And we still had trouble filling seats. So I don't know. Obviously we need the Tonys, and I hope it runs for a long time. But
me too.
You also historically look at Steve Sondheim. I'm old enough to write, like, remember that, but remember the struggle was like all of it.
Oh, he's too cold. He's too cerebral. He's too
is that, and nothing recouped and nothing ran, and look at what's happened. So I think it is also interesting to look historically back, and what David said is really true. There are a lot of people. The thing about music theater, which is quite beautiful, is there is so much room for that kind of the classics that came from radio humor, which I think David hasn't really just has like Abe Burrows, that incredible rhythm. It's about that hearing. Those shows sit alongside the other shows. It's just making room for the smaller expression, I think, is what you're saying, Peter.
Yeah, Sondheim's a great example. You're absolutely right. I grew up on shows that were gorgeous, and brilliant, and didn't make money, or rarely made money, in spite of, critic love and, intellectual embrace. But it was partly because you had a producer like Hal Prince, who believed. I mean, there was just belief. And I wonder, David Stone in this case, we don't talk, individual producers very much, but it seemed to me that, David deserves a mention here because, I mean, he was with you from the get-go. I mean, this was, I remember, at the Atlantic, David had this connection, if I'm not wrong,
no,
with
you're
the
right.
show.
Oh, way before that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because we had when we had the idea, David signed. He did not hear a note before he signed on. But look at Next to Normal. Next to Normal is a profound piece of work, and I'm sure it will. I'm sure we'll be back. It's going to be at the Dunmar, and that was, it's about a group of people, and also along with David Stone, we have to mention Jeff Stone, no relation,
of course,
and the idea of that you get these collaborators who specialize in creating the big idea with a small cast. And that is without it becoming hysterical or hyperbolic, but true to life, but will also go and translate to Rosie Z. And that is that's not a small task, because that's one of the reasons why people always say, I don't think this can transfer to Broadway. It's too small. It's like, okay, I haven't heard that before.
I was going to just extol the virtues of David Stone a little bit more, because he was at the very beginning. He helped us, he gave us support and encouraged us. And when we needed to do a demo, he helped us do a demo. But he also, stayed out of our way in a way that not all producers do, that he nudged us along without breathing down our necks and got us to where we needed to go. And so that gave us a head start. And that's something that other musicals also don't have, that we had that support from the very beginning that enabled us to, write the show in the first place and then get us to the Atlantic. And then when everything lined up the Atlantic, to move us to Broadway. So that was just a huge advantage as well, that we realized we are incredibly lucky to have him, at the wheel.
I'm just curious. I want to go back to the genesis a little bit, because I think, David, you had said that you had written the play with Mary Louise Burke in mind. When did Victoria Clark, so I guess it's a two-part question, like how important is it for you two actually to have someone in mind, or do you even do that? And when did Victoria Clark, who's such a huge part of this particular production, get into the picture? And once she was in, did that influence the way you worked on the show?
I'll talk about the first part, and then I'll let Jeanine talk about Vicky. Obviously, the play was written for Mary Louise, and so that made the writing of the play easier and very specific. But then when it was time to reinvent it, the hard part for me was getting Mary Louise Burke out of my mind. Right. The idea, okay, we're probably not going to find someone that can do what Mary Louise did, because it was so unique and so specific and so true to her. But can we find someone who could reinvent the character entirely and make it sing, but still has that childlike spirit at least? And so now, Jeanine, to find someone, you could not find an actress more different than Mary Louise Burke than Vicky Clark. But Vicky was actually Jeanine's idea. So why don't you take it, Jeanine?
Well, we developed it with one of the things I think that it's important is, as you're developing a show, you work with different actors and different casts all the time. And part of that very difficult dance is it exists to be sung by people, not by me, because nobody wants to hear that. And yet at the same time, so you don't want to tailor it specifically to one person, because you're tailoring it to a character played by hopefully many people down the line. We were interested in creating something by putting it in a lexicon for older women, because there are not many being written right now. Everything is belted and everything, I understand it, but the days of the soprano, except for people like Adam Gettle, Jason Robert Brown is very interested in writing for a greater tessitura, but for bass baritones, so the tessitura itself has squished.
Interesting.
Oh, wow. I'd not thought of that, but yeah.
Yeah. So you want to expand it at the same time. That's a very operatic, that comes out of operetta tradition and vaudeville. That comes from operetta tradition.
Yeah.
A lot of people have left that by the wayside. But, again, with Light in the Piazza coming back, you'll hear it back. And again, what Jason wrote in Bridges of Madison County for Kelly O'Hara, you'll hear that coming back. So sometimes you want to Barbara Cook it. You want to make sure that you're doing that to keep that alive. Otherwise, you're only going to hear from middle C up to E. And that's all. And you can't express everything in that way. But that said, when Vicki and I serve on a board for the Kurt Weill Foundation, which is an incredible board, beautifully run by someone named Kim Kowalski, and we were thinking about actors. And I think the thing that I also learned from being a pit musician is 8 times a week is no joke. I mean, it seems like it's such an easy thing. Even, my dad used to say, you only work 8 times a week. It's like a teacher. You don't work, like they have all summer off. And I would say, like, when I was teaching, the first thing I would do would pour myself a bourbon after I got up. Because the amount of energy and the prep time, and you can't go to sleep for 2 or 3 hours after you're doing something 8 times a week, which is asking of your body a very strange thing. It's a bizarre. So you have to protect people while you're doing that. And so when I looked across the table at Vicki, I saw the absolute that little sparkle in her eye and the glint, and she's funny. She's always been seen by us as a sort of royalty, as a regal, as a very upright Julie Andrews.
If I may, but when she started very early on, because I remember seeing her in the 90s, and very early on she was a comic actress.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then she took a turn in a more dramatic register that you're mentioning, but she really started, she was kind of typecast as a kind of light comic.
She had an Eve Arden-like thing. We did How to Succeed together, and we knew each other. I didn't go to Yale because I could never have gotten in there. But the whole group of people came out of that. Ted Sperling and Adam and Tina Landau and Vicki Clark, and they all knew each other. And so I think eventually that thing that she did in How to Succeed, which was sandpaper humor, so funny, so throwaway, she got known for other roles where her spine was just ramrod straight. And in this, I thought, especially seeing her, she was so funny at these board meetings. And I called or texted David and I said, I think it's Vicki.
Oh, wow.
And then, Jess and we all did everything together. And then I met with Vicki because she was very, very she was not sure about to sing yes.
Well, that goes to the original question. Did we, were we writing to an actor? We were writing to the character. So Vicki, when she saw what the character was, said, that's not me. No, you can't cast me. I don't do that. And so then Jeanine and Vicki had a session and said, you could do it. And, I think it made Vicki do things that she wasn't used to doing, which was really exciting for us. And then once Vicki was in there, Jeanine, correct me if I'm wrong, but we made some adjustments. So there were some Vicki-isms that we wrote to, but the part was mostly the part, and Vicki came to it instead of the reverse.
Well, and in terms of that kind of alchemy, I have to say that the moment that Bonnie Milligan walked on stage, the first time I saw her do this, I thought she invented the character. I mean, there were just times when the belief goes so deep. There's something so at once transparent and impenetrable at the same time, because you're convinced that this person has lived before the play started and will live after the play finishes. I don't know what that is. I don't know what exists in an actor's temperament that makes that happen. But also, when you guys wrote that part, and obviously it's expansively a show-stopping role. Are you conscious that you're investing a character with those things, or do you discover it when the person walks in the room and you see what you've done?
Again, it's a combo. I mean, the character is the character, so that we knew that this character is going to come in and make an entrance and take over the play, essentially, right? And so, what does that tell us about that character? Who is that character? How would that character sing? And so that is all in the fabric of the dramaturgy of the show and the songs. But that doesn't mean anything until you put it in Bonnie Milligan's hands and she says, I got this, and works her magic and makes you think, exactly what you thought, which is she is making it up. This person walked in whole cloth and just started improvising on stage. And that is the magic of Bonnie Milligan. She, we knew it as soon as she put herself on tape and auditioned. We're like, okay, we're done. This is perfect. We don't have any, and that's not taking anything away from Bonnie too, because she continues to surprise us. Like the stuff is there, and then she'll turn a phrase or underplay something so brilliantly that all credit is to her.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting, the other thing that this show embodies is an actor like Justin Cooley, who has no history whatsoever. You had no idea he plays Seth. I mean, we should just say that Bonnie Milligan plays Aunt Deborah, this lovable larcenous aunt, Justin Cooley plays Seth, who befriends Kimberly. He's an actual teenager. But I don't know how you know that a kid from Kansas City who wins a Jimmy Award can do this 8 times a week, as you say, Jeanine. This job is grueling and terrifying and pressure-packed. How do you know that someone can handle this kind of job?
Well, I think you don't. And I think at the end of the day, there is just a faith-based, and there is David and I, with Jessica and Danny and all the designers, we were in the room all of the time. Unless people are learning music, where the last thing they want is me grimacing and becoming a Henry Moore sculpture in the corner, that's when I get out. They have to be able to have a process. George Wolfe said this to me a long time ago. You've had a process. It's lasted years. It's been very private. Get out so we can have ours. I think that was really helpful. So to know when to come in and when to really make sure that you don't abandon them ever, so you can see, because at the end of the day, what we do is generative and what they do is interpretive. And that is so much of the distinction of why, what's happening right now, the WGA is very important to understand, to go. In fact, the person who went from the blank page the only person who went from the blank page is David Lindsay-Abaire. Even what I do is interpretive, even though I'm generating work, it's because he put the blueprint down from his brain. And then I got on the train, and then everybody else gets in the little clown car, whatever it is. And we go on that ride. At the end of the day, you do not know how someone is going to use a rehearsal process and the idea of previews. I'm from the school that you change things constantly. And if you put it on piano one day, it's on piano, and then it's out the next day. And I learned that from great and brave directors. With the advent of the first preview feeling like the opening, it's changed. And I think decisions maybe are made a little bit more because it spreads like wildfire now, that in fact things get published so quickly there is no place to hide. And I think that's what's difficult about previews. Or I think I can understand the pressure I felt. I don't know if this was true for you, David, but the pressure in a first preview feels like an opening now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. To go back to Justin, only because it's so interesting, his journey, when we first saw him, he was just graduating from high school, so green in the most wonderful ways that, would be lying if we didn't say there were people on the team that had some concerns, like whether he could step up. What I knew, and many of us knew, is like what he brought into that room was just pure magic. And he just was that character. And I remember saying, like, if he just says the lines the way he would in real life, then we're golden. He doesn't have to do anything. He just has to be. And that's what he did in the audition. He just was. And then to see him, like, in real time, figure out where laughs were and how to hold and become a savvy performer on stage in front of the audience, like, that gift was also there. He is more than just being now. He is acting his face off and knows how to work a crowd better than almost anyone else on that stage, frankly.
But he was also...
He is such a pro.
Working with the most beautiful thing about this show, which is why I love working with intergenerational shows, is you have one generation teaching the next generation who's teaching that generation. One of the reasons David and I have a lot of students, and one of the reasons it keeps your brain and your thoughts and your curiosity young and alive. It's not youthful in terms of age. It's useful in terms of knowing that how much you have yet to know. And that idea. And so we watched Vicky learn from him and them.
Yep.
And she leads this company old school. She was
Beautifully.
like, get behind me, follow my lead.
Yeah.
And that is, when you lead a company, you also set a tone. And we were talking about the tone of the show. There's a tone of the backstage life. It's one of the beauties of doing something at the public, the green room. There is no separation, and everybody brings that. And it's the one thing that we would miss at Caroline when we went uptown, was you miss that under the backstage life where everybody would hang out all the time.
Did you have a similar experience on Fun Home, which was also a similar intergenerational? Because you had Judy Kuhn, who's, very experienced, and much younger. Sydney, much younger. Like, did you feel like a certain similar dynamic on Fun Home?
Yeah, very much so. And it's interesting. This one, when David and I were talking, because when we did Shrek, it's wonderful to have children in a show, but that also comes with a lot to put on their shoulders. You have to be really careful because it's a big experience, and it can be very hard for them if you make it hard. And for Fun Home, the beauty is they're all. I was at Café Luxembourg last year, and the bartender said, "Hey, Jeanine, it's Griffin." I was like, "What? What? It's gin." And I was like, "No, you can't be serving me a martini. You're 10."
Oh, that's great.
So funny.
That's great. All right, I have to ask this. I asked this in the spirit of love. I was at I was at a luncheon last week to talk about the Tonys. I was a speaker at this thing at Sardi's. Don't ask. Anyway, I was invited, and somebody asked this question, and I just thought it was an interesting. She said, "Listen, is anybody else here disturbed by the fact at Kimberly Akimbo, someone is teaching kids how to fabricate checks, and then they make money, and nobody gets punished. They get what they want. Is anyone else disturbed by that?" And my dander got up. I should have been much more. I said, "Hey, look, Hamlet killed Claudius, for Christ's sakes. It's not like the world. It's not like we're adhering to a moral code that corresponds to what happens in day-to-day life." But I wondered if you had any discussion at any point about the morality of what Deborah teaches those kids. And we know it's tongue-in-cheek, and we know a lot worse goes on in the world. But I wondered if that ever was anything that you guys batted back and forth.
Well, she definitely shouldn't see Sweeney.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. That one. I came into my mind too late.
We did. David, I'll let you take this one because we had weeks of discussion about this. It's not a morality tale, but it's a tale about people who do the wrong thing. But
right.
Well, that's it. I don't know that we discussed it for weeks, but
it felt like weeks.
In any good narrative, sometimes people do bad things, right? You want conflict, you want tension, and you want. This world in particular of ours, it's gray. Not nobody is a saint and nobody is a villain. Whether it's those awful, monstrous parents who truly love her but are incapable of loving her in the right way because they don't have the tools. Or whether it's Aunt Deborah, who does nothing but bad things and still has a deep love for her niece. Right. And then there are these teenagers that seem incredibly smart and should make wise decisions, but who have crushes on everybody and make bad choices because they're dumb teenagers, and that's what happens. And so in terms of the drama of it, we want conflict, and people behave badly sometimes. But we also went out of our way to say, look, we established that they are only stealing small amounts from people. Like, the checks are not big. I always imagine $25, $35. There's lots of them. A point is made, like, we will also pay all of these people back. And so
we do.
Those are
no
lines.
one talks about
That's
that,
in there.
In the play.
It's in the play.
Oh my God.
He said, Kim says, I'm going to do it under these conditions. And Deborah says, we'll see. And so Deborah doesn't want to do all that, but Kim and Seth are in it, like, we're going to do this, but we're going to do the right thing at the end of the day. If that's not enough for people, sorry, you go see Sweetie cut up a bunch of people and bake them into pies. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Also, I do want to say, as a public service, you should always write checks with a certain gel pen, which can't wash, which I wanted to sell, but people felt like that was maybe not the right message.
Oh my God!
I didn't know
would have
that.
bought
Yes,
a special gel pen. Oh,
yeah.
That's fantastic.
Also, Evan Hansen is lying to that family for the whole entire show.
You're exactly right.
That is so mean.
No, but I understand what she's saying.
It didn't bother me at all.
What people are grasping at for one show is to be everything.
Right.
Yeah,
and in this world that we want one thing to be everything, you are going to be disappointed. Like we didn't go to musical theater for our history. It should be the beginning of a journey that you look up. What pen should I use to not have my checks washed? Oh, a gel pen.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, I sort of lost it. I feel like I lost it a little bit with that poor lady. So I appreciate your. I appreciate your.
But you're actually touching on what you just said, that the show cannot be everything to everybody. Right. And I think that actually an issue that I have with a lot of shows right now. They are trying just that. And I think doing a show is having to make decisions. And you cannot be everything to everybody. You cannot have 25 plot lines, each one, serving. And I'm seeing a lot of creep of that right now. And I'm just wondering also, do you feel like making those decisions as, okay, we're going to focus on this. That is our story. That is what's saying. And we're sorry, our story is not this or that. It's this. Do you feel that there's more resistance to that now, maybe? Because
I actually think it's a very positive thing in that there is the beginning of change. And the beginning of change is mess. And in the way that it starts with an impulse. And the impulse, it's like, I think when you start therapy, I started therapy 25 years ago, and I would sit down with and finally my friend said, are you in therapy? Because I was like, and I don't agree with that. And I don't like this. And I can't. But he was like, we get it. You're in therapy. You have a lot of feelings. Because it was like weaponizing new power of speaking truth. And they were like, zip it, just dole it out. So I think there was this idea. Now, if we look at, I was talking to David, Italian-American stories, there are none in musical theater. None. If you see an Italian-American or an Italian character, he's a gangster.
Well, what about the, oh my God, the
Most Happy Fella.
Yeah, right. That's the only one I can think of. That's the only two, yeah.
That's the only one. That's what I'm saying. So there's not an abundance of stories yet about them, so that you get the stereotype of vengeance and violence and gambling and slick back hair. Eventually, when you get an abundance of stories, you can get a full spectrum. So I think the idea that people want to include people is very good. The idea that one show can hold multiples is, I think, misguided but understandable. What you want to do is have characters who go deep as opposed to go wide. And that's what's very difficult, because there's not enough real estate in a musical to deepen the stories of so many people unless it's an ensemble piece.
Right. Well, I think that that's an important point. I mean, the emotional, the crescendo that happens emotionally when an entire cast sings together of disparate characters come together in one voice is replicably, devastating over and over and over again. And I always tear up when when all the fairy tale characters in Into the Woods sing together and in lockstep, in unison. It's epiphanic.
The simultaneity of thought in musicals are its great superpower and its great undoing. Because, when people applaud it to me or laugh together in a theater, it's profound because the people for 1 second have the same impulse.
Exactly.
Very powerful.
We should wrap up and let you guys have lives. But one last question. We talk about the generative aspect of what you do. Are you guys in conversation about, a continuum of musicals for the two of you together?
Yes. Yeah. We are talking about 2 new projects, and we probably won't say much about them, but we are talking about other things moving forward because this is too fun. Because
you're now you're sort of now enshrined as a in the history of Broadway musicals, I don't know if you prefer Tesori and Lindsay-Abaire or Lindsay-Abaire Tesori, but it's I don't know how that works. But, I feel like there's a pantheon that you guys need to be in.
I prefer DLT.
Delicious. That's exactly what I'm ordering for lunch.
Especially with a little bit of mayo.
Beautiful.
DLT.
Look, I don't want to, hog Jeanine all to myself. One of the best things about her is that she works with so many different writers. And so, I hope we continue to write musicals, but also there are other people in line. No?
Are you breaking up with me?
Oh my God.
Never. I just, well, then put a ring on it. I'm waiting.
You're doing a podcast to break this off.
I love it. There's the lead.
Oh my God.
Lindsay-Abaire proposes. Okay.
Oh my God.
There you go.
Yeah.
You got it.
Well, listen, we really appreciate it. Elisabeth, this was really fun for us, I have to say. For you too, Elisabeth,
we basically do this just because we're selfish. We're two selfish bastards, and we like to talk to the people we like.
Exactly.
We're doing this just as an excuse to get people over and chat.
Is that what your podcast is called? Two Selfish Bastards?
That's right.
Oh, that is good.
Two selfish bastards.
That would probably get more.
Yes.
We'd probably get more subscribers
Let's do it.
that way.
It's good.
I'm on board. board.
Too selfish, but
so
that's
thank
right.
you. Thank you both. And we look forward to the next DLT production.
Thank you, guys.
Well, that was fabulous.
They're so good, these two.
Oh, my God. Yeah. No, that was really rewarding. And you said it all, Elisabeth. We just sort of we use this as to feed our own addiction, basically.
It really is.
So thank you all for joining us, and please join us next time on marksvincentelli.substack.com, where you can follow the show. And we desperately, really, sincerely want you to become one of our prized paying subscribers, because there are extras for those people.
Yes, extra. So we need to come up with some more premiums for our Prime members. They usually get special episodes, but I feel like we need to cook up some swag or something. It's anyway, something to think about. Maybe it'll be like a jail pen with our name on it. A jail pen, so your checks, for all of you out there who still write checks, will never be stolen by Bunny Milligan. Okay, so while we figure that out, you can follow us on Twitter for updates and, of course, great gossip. My handle is @evincentelli, and Peter is @PeterMarksDrama. And we'll talk at you again soon. Bye!